Tell me more, human. An alien girl's fascination with humanity, HFY Reddit Sci-Fi HFY. The neutral station called Orioles floated between three star systems, far from any single empire. It was a place of rules, quiet voices, and careful distance. Species that once fought wars now passed each other in wide halls, pretending they were not afraid. Technology was advanced, words were measured, and emotions were usually hidden. Humans were there too. Most species barely noticed them. Humans were smaller than many, softer than most, and lived such short lives that older races found it difficult to take them seriously. They were allowed to exist in the station because they followed rules well and asked for little. To the wider galaxy, humans were background noise. Lyran noticed them anyway. Lyran was young by her people's standards, though still older than any human present. Her species valued logic, structure, and long-term planning. Emotion was studied, not felt. Curiosity, however, was encouraged, and Lyran had more of it than most. She first noticed the human during a diplomatic session. He sat at the edge of the chamber, not speaking unless spoken to. While others displayed holograms and numbers, he simply watched. His eyes moved constantly, taking in faces, gestures, pauses. He looked calm but not passive. That was unusual. Most humans Lyran had observed were nervous in such gatherings. They knew they were weak here. This one did not show it. After the session ended, Lyran followed him at a respectful distance. He walked through the station with an easy pace, stopping to greet a station worker, thanking a maintenance drone as if it could understand. None of it seemed forced. Lyran waited until they reached a quiet observation deck. Stars stretched endlessly beyond the transparent barrier. "Human," she said. He turned, surprised but not alarmed. "Yes," Lyran studied him closely. Facial muscles, posture, breathing, all normal. "Tell me more," she said. He blinked. "About what?" "About yourself." "About your kind," Lyran replied. "You are difficult to categorize." The human smiled slightly. "That's a big question." "I have time," Lyran said. That was true. She had decades, he had much less. He considered her for a moment, then nodded. "All right, ask." Lyran began with simple questions. Human biology, social structure, education. The answers were direct but often included small stories. He explained concepts with examples, not just facts. When he spoke of human history, he did not hide failures. "We mess up a lot," he said calmly. "Probably more than we get right." Lyran frowned. "Yet you still exist." "Yeah," he replied. "We're stubborn like that." Stubborn. The word repeated in her mind. As days passed, Lyran sought him out more often. Other aliens noticed but said nothing. Humans were not considered dangerous, and Lyran was not considered reckless. They talked in quiet places, watching ships come and go. The human told stories of Earth, of storms that destroyed cities and people who rebuilt anyway, of wars that nearly ended everything and movements that stopped them, of jokes told during blackouts and songs sung in shelters. "These events caused extreme loss," Lyran said once. "Your species should have collapsed." "We almost did," he answered, "more than once." "Why did you continue?" He thought for a long moment. "Because someone always believes tomorrow can be better, even when it doesn't make sense." Lyran recorded that answer. It did not fit known survival models. She began observing other humans too. Engineers who fixed systems that were not theirs. Medics who treated injured aliens without hesitation. A group of humans playing a simple game in a corridor, laughing loudly while others passed by in confusion. They laughed often, even when resources were limited. Even when their position was weak. It made no logical sense. One cycle, alarms echoed through Orioles. A distant outpost had gone silent. Long-range sensors showed unknown vessels moving through nearby space. The council gathered quickly. Advanced species spoke with confidence. Their fleets were strong, their weapons precise. The threat would be handled. Humans were not asked for input. Lyran watched the human diplomat during the meeting. His jaw was tight, his eyes sharper than before. Later, she found him again on the observation deck. "You appear concerned," she said. "We are," he replied. "That silence isn't normal." "The Council believes the threat manageable," Lyran said. He nodded. "They usually do." "That statement implies doubt." "It implies experience," he corrected gently. Lyran paused. "Tell me more." He exhaled slowly. "Humans have seen this pattern before. Confidence, assumptions, ignoring small warnings, that's how disasters start. You believe the Council is wrong. I believe they might be," he said. "And if they are, it's going to get bad fast." Lyran processed this. Advanced species rarely failed so completely, but humans spoke as if failure was familiar. Days later, confirmation arrived. The unknown vessels were not retreating. They adapted to scanning attempts. Communication failed. 2 patrol ships vanished without signals. Panic spread quietly. The Council argued, technology was adjusted, protocols were rewritten. Still, nothing worked. Humans began preparing. Lyran noticed it first. Small groups coordinating, supplies being moved, emergency routes memorized. They were not ordered to do this. They just did it. She approached the human diplomat again. "Why are your people acting independently?" "Because waiting is dangerous," he replied. "That behavior violates standard procedure." He met her gaze. "Standard procedure assumes control." "Sometimes control is an illusion." Lyran felt something unfamiliar. Unease. When the first attack came, it was fast. Silent ships appeared within defensive range. Energy systems failed across several decks. Advanced weapons misfired or shut down entirely. Screams echoed through the station. Humans moved. They guided civilians through dark corridors. They used manual tools when systems failed. They shared oxygen masks without checking species. One human sealed a breach using a temporary fix that should not have worked. But it did. Lyran watched from a command platform as chaos spread. Species that relied on automation were helpless. Species that depended on hierarchy waited for orders that never came. Humans did not wait. The human diplomat stood beside a damaged console, coordinating with others through short-range comms. His voice was calm, clear, steady. "Section C is clear. Move now." Lyran realized something important then. Humans were comfortable in uncertainty. The attack was eventually repelled, not by superior firepower but by delays, misdirection, and improvised defenses. The enemy withdrew, damaged and confused. The station survived. In the aftermath, the Council was silent. Data did not explain what had happened. Lyran stood again with the human at the observation deck. The stars looked the same, but everything felt different. "You were correct," she said. "Your assessment surpassed ours." He shrugged lightly. "We've had practice." She studied him, her voice quieter than before. "Your species should not exist by known models." He smiled, tired but genuine. "Yeah, we hear that a lot." Lyran looked out into the endless dark. "Tell me more, human," she said again. This time, it was no longer simple curiosity. It was the beginning of understanding. The station did not return to normal after the attack. Oriali still floated in silence between the stars, but something had changed in how its people moved and spoke. Conversations were quieter. Steps were faster. Eyes lingered on humans longer than before. Lyran noticed everything. Official reports described the incident as a limited hostile encounter. Advanced systems had failed due to unknown interference. Emergency responses were labeled adequate. The word human was mentioned only a few times, buried deep in technical notes. That omission bothered Lyran. She spent more time with the human diplomat now. His name was Daniel. Humans used personal names often, another habit Lyran found strange but efficient. Names created connection. Connection created trust. Daniel no longer pretended everything was fine. He still smiled, but there was tension behind it. Humans, Lyran was learning, were good at hiding fear without denying it. The Council called for another series of meetings. The unknown enemy had not returned, but probes showed movement at the edge of known space. No communication, no clear pattern. Lyran attended as an observer. Humans were invited this time, though mostly as listeners. Alien representatives argued with confidence. Stronger shields, faster weapons, better algorithms. They believed the previous failure was technical, not conceptual. Daniel listened quietly. Lyran leaned closer to him. "You disagree," she said softly. "I think they're solving the wrong problem," he replied. "Explain." "They're trying to overpower something they don't understand," he said. "Humans learned a long time ago that raw power isn't always the answer." Lyran stored that. After the meeting, she requested access to human historical archives. The council approved it without much thought. Human history was considered chaotic and inefficient, not useful. Lyran disagreed. She studied wars where humans fought enemies stronger than themselves and survived by changing tactics mid-conflict. She studied disasters where governments failed but communities adapted. She watched recordings of humans laughing after loss, rebuilding after collapse. One pattern appeared again and again. Humans did not break when systems failed. They expected failure. Lyran observed humans on Orialis more closely. They trained without being ordered. They practiced moving through the station during simulated power loss. They shared skills freely across roles. Engineers taught diplomats how to fix doors. Medics trained security staff in emergency care. No one questioned why. When Lyran asked Daniel about it, he answered simply, "We assume help might not come." "That is a pessimistic outlook," Lyran said. He shook his head. "It's a realistic one." Another alarm sounded days later. This time it was not an attack. It was a warning. A ship had arrived unexpectedly. It was damaged, barely functional, and broadcasting a simple distress signal. The ship was not from any known species. Docking was debated. Risk was calculated. Finally, the council agreed. Humans volunteered first. Lyran watched from the medical bay as the ship was opened. Inside were beings unlike any she had seen. Thin, pale, fragile-looking. Many were injured. Their technology was crude compared to the station's. They were refugees. The story came slowly. Their home systems had been destroyed by the same enemy that attacked Orialis. Their fleets failed. Their defenses meant nothing. They ran until they could not run anymore. The council debated again. Resources were limited. Taking refugees could attract further danger. Humans did not debate. They gave up quarters, shared food, set up temporary shelters. They listened. Lyran asked Daniel why. "They didn't choose this," he said. "Neither did we when it happened to us." "You are projecting your own history onto them," Lyran said. "Of course we are," he replied. "That's how empathy works. Empathy." Another human concept difficult to quantify. Days passed. The refugees rested. Repairs were made. Scouts reported movement again, closer this time. Fear spread openly now. The council ordered full defensive readiness. Humans were included in planning sessions at last. Some alien commanders resisted, but the data was undeniable. Human actions during the first attack had saved lives. Daniel and other humans proposed changes that seemed illogical at first, reducing automation, creating manual backups, training non-humans in basic problem-solving without assistance systems. Many objected. Lyran supported the proposals. She surprised herself by doing so. "They have demonstrated effectiveness under uncertainty," she told the council. "That trait is now statistically relevant." The changes were approved. The second attack was worse. The enemy ships arrived in greater numbers. They adapted faster. Shields failed again, but this time the station did not freeze. Manual systems engaged. Lights stayed on in critical areas. Evacuations were smoother. Defensive traps slowed the attackers. Humans led mixed-species teams through damaged sectors. They communicated simply, clear instructions. No complex jargon. Lyran found herself moving with one such team. She was not trained for combat, but humans did not leave her behind. "Stay close," one said. "If you fall, we pick you up." That statement struck her deeply. During the chaos, a refugee child became trapped in a failing habitat module. The structure was unstable. Sensors warned of collapse. Alien safety officers refused entry. Risk was too high. A human went anyway. Lyran watched in disbelief as he crawled through debris, guided only by shouted directions and instinct. He returned moments before the collapse, carrying the child. The human collapsed afterward, injured but alive. The child survived. Lyran felt something tighten in her chest. Her species did not have a word for it. The attack ended after hours of fighting. The enemy withdrew again, leaving wreckage behind. Orialis was damaged but standing. This time, the council did not pretend. Humans were no longer ignored. In a closed session, Lyran presented her findings. She spoke of adaptability, of emotional strength, of willingness to act without certainty. "Humans are dangerous," she said, choosing her words carefully. "Not because they seek destruction, but because they do not surrender to fear." The council listened. Afterward, Lyran found Daniel resting in the medical wing. His arm was bandaged. He looked exhausted. "You risked much," she said. He smiled weakly. "Part of the job." "You are not soldiers," Lyran said. "Neither were we," he replied. "At first." Lyran sat beside him. Silence stretched comfortably between them. "Tell me more," she said quietly. Daniel closed his eyes. "About what?" "About how your people keep going," she said. "Even when logic says you should stop." He thought for a long time. "Because someone has to," he said finally, "and we decided it might as well be us." Lyran looked around the medical bay. Humans tending aliens, aliens learning from humans, refugees sleeping safely. She understood now. Humanity was not strong because it was unbreakable. Humanity was strong because it broke, learned, and stood back up. And the galaxy was only beginning to understand what that meant. The silence before the third encounter was worse than the fighting. Orialis drifted through space with damaged sections sealed and lights dimmed to save power. Repairs were ongoing, but everyone knew time was short. The enemy had tested the station twice. Now they understood it better. Lyran stood in the command center, watching star maps shift slowly. Human teams worked beside advanced species without hesitation now. There was no confusion about roles. Everyone did what they could. Humans thrived in this kind of pressure. Daniel was back on duty despite his injury. He moved slower, but his voice remained steady. Lyran noticed how others listened when he spoke. Not just humans. Aliens too. That had never happened before. Long-range sensors detected movement. Not scattered ships this time, but a formation. Large, coordinated. The enemy was coming to finish the job. The council gathered quickly. Fear was no longer hidden. Voices shook. Calculations ran nonstop. The enemy ships were adapting again, changing frequencies, ignoring traps that worked before. One commander said the word no one wanted to hear. Evacuation. There were not enough ships. The refugees could not flee. Many species could not survive in escape pods for long. The station itself could not move fast enough. Silence filled the chamber. Daniel stepped forward. "We don't run," he said calmly. Several heads turned sharply. "That is not logical," an elder species representative replied. "Survival probability improves if we fight smart," Daniel finished. "Not strong, smart." Lyran watched him carefully. He was not angry, he was focused. "We know how they think now," he continued. "They expect us to react the same way every time, so we don't." "What is your proposal?" the council leader asked. Daniel looked around the room. "We let them in." Shock rippled through the chamber. Lyran understood before anyone else did. "You intend to fight inside the station," she said. Daniel nodded. "They rely on range, systems, patterns. Inside Orialis, those advantages disappear." "That would endanger civilians," someone argued. "They're already endangered," Daniel replied. This gives us a chance. Lyran spoke next. Humans have consistently performed best in close, uncertain conditions. The data supports this strategy. The council hesitated. Then slowly, one by one, they agreed. The station prepared for something it had never planned for. Internal defenses were reconfigured. Non-essential sections were powered down. Humans led mixed teams into key corridors. Lyran joined Daniel's group. She no longer questioned why she was there. The enemy arrived. Their ships tore into Oriales with precision. Hull breaches opened like wounds. Gravity failed in some areas. Smoke and darkness spread. Then the boarding began. The enemy beings were tall, angular, and silent. Their movements were exact, almost mechanical. They advanced in perfect formation, expecting resistance to collapse. It did not. Humans attacked from unexpected angles. They used the environment, narrow halls, broken lighting, floating debris. Aliens fought beside them, guided by simple human commands. Now. A human grabbed her arm and pulled her out of danger without slowing. The enemy adapted, but too slowly. Every adjustment cost them time. Humans used that time ruthlessly. In one section, gravity failed completely. The enemy hesitated. Humans did not. They pushed off walls using handholds and cables. They fought in 3 dimensions, laughing breathlessly as if daring the universe to stop them. Lyran watched in awe. The enemy began to falter, but they were not finished. A massive energy surge built near the station's core. The enemy intended to overload Oriales and destroy it entirely. Daniel realized it instantly. "They're going for the core," he said. "If they trigger it, everyone dies." "How do we stop it?" Lyran asked. He looked at the map. His face hardened. "Someone has to manually shut it down." "That area is unstable," Lyran said. "Survival probability is minimal." Daniel nodded once. "I know." Before Lyran could react, he turned to his team. "Keep fighting," he said. "Buy us time." "Us." Lyran followed him. "Daniel, you cannot," she began. "I won't make it alone," he said. "And you're the only one who understands their systems well enough." Fear surged through Lyran. Real fear. They moved through collapsing corridors, dodging enemy patrols and falling debris. The station groaned around them like a wounded creature. At the core chamber, energy arced wildly. The enemy device pulsed, feeding on the station's power. Daniel began working immediately, hands flying over manual controls. Lyran assisted, translating alien signals, rerouting flows. The enemy arrived. Lyran took cover as Daniel stood his ground, buying seconds. Each second mattered. The device began to destabilize. "Now," Daniel said. Lyran triggered the final override. The surge stopped. Silence followed. Then the enemy ships began to retreat. Across Oriales, fighting slowed, then ended. Confusion turned into disbelief. They had won. Medics rushed to the core. Lyran knelt beside Daniel. He was injured but breathing. "You're alive," she said, her voice shaking. "Yeah," he whispered. "Told you we're stubborn." The station survived again. This time the galaxy noticed. Days later, the council reconvened. There was no debate. Humanity was formally recognized as a key defensive species. Not because of weapons or numbers, but because of mindset. Lyran presented her final report. "Humans are not predictable," she said. "They do not seek control. They seek survival for all, even at personal cost. This makes them uniquely suited to chaos." The council accepted it without objection. Later, Lyran stood with Daniel at the observation deck once more. The stars were brighter now. "You risked everything," she said. He smiled faintly. "So did you." She looked at him, then out into space. "Tell me more, human," she said softly. He chuckled. "Careful, that question changes things." Lyran already knew. The galaxy had tested humanity. Humanity had answered. And the final part of that answer was still coming. The war did not end with noise. It ended with silence that felt heavy across the station. Oriales floated once more between the stars, scarred but alive. Hull breaches were sealed. power slowly restored, and emergency lights replaced darkness. Ships came and went, bringing supplies, aid, and news. News traveled fast. The enemy had withdrawn far beyond known space. They did not regroup. They did not return. For the first time since they appeared, the galaxy could breathe. Lyran stood in the central archive chamber, watching data streams scroll past. Reports from dozens of systems confirmed the same thing. Wherever humans had been present during the conflict, losses were lower. Survival rates were higher. Recovery was faster. It was not luck. It was pattern. The council convened for the final time regarding the crisis. This time, humans were not placed at the edge of the chamber. They stood among the core delegates. Daniel stood quietly, his injuries still healing. He looked uncomfortable in the attention, but he did not step away. The council leader spoke slowly. This conflict revealed a flaw in our understanding of strength. We believed control was power. We believed certainty was safety. He paused. We were wrong. Eyes turned toward the humans. Humanity demonstrated resilience beyond prediction. Not through dominance, but through cooperation, adaptability, and willingness to sacrifice. There was no applause. Advanced species did not applaud, but respect filled the room. Lyran felt something warm settle in her chest. She had no name for it, but she did not try to analyze it away. After the session ended, Orialis changed in small but meaningful ways. Humans were asked for input, not permission. Training programs were redesigned with human methods included. Manual systems were no longer considered primitive. They were considered necessary. Refugees began returning to rebuilt systems, guided by joint fleets that included human ships. The galaxy was rebuilding, and humanity was part of every conversation. Lyran spent much of her time documenting what she had witnessed. Her report grew beyond expected limits. It was no longer a study of a species. It was a warning. She wrote that humans did not fear chaos. They learned from it. They grew inside it. She wrote that humans were not heroes because they were fearless. They were heroes because they acted despite fear. When the report was complete, she sent it to every major council archive. Then she went to find Daniel. He was on the observation deck again, watching stars drift by. Humans seemed to like this place, perhaps because it reminded them how small they were, or how vast everything could be. "The council accepted your conclusions," he said without turning. "They were not my conclusions alone," Lyran replied. "They were yours," he smiled. "Funny, we usually don't get credit." Lyran stood beside him. For a long moment, neither spoke. "The galaxy is changing," she said finally. "Yeah," Daniel said. "Change does that." "You do not seem concerned." "We are," he said, "but we've learned something important." "What is that?" "That we're not alone anymore." Lyran looked at him. "You were never alone." He met her gaze. "It feels different now." Time passed. Months later, a signal arrived from the edge of known space. Not hostile, not hidden, clear and deliberate, the enemy. They requested communication. Fear stirred across the galaxy. Old instincts returned. Shields were raised, fleets prepared. Humans did something unexpected. They answered. Daniel was present during the transmission. Lyran stood beside him as the image formed. The enemy representative appeared, damaged and tired. Their voice was flat, but something had changed. "We underestimated you," the being said. "Your species disrupted our models," Daniel nodded. "Happens a lot." "You are inefficient," the being continued. "You take risks without guarantee. You protect weaker units. You adapt unpredictably." "Yeah," Daniel said again. "That's kind of our thing." The being paused. "We withdraw permanently. Conflict with humanity produces unacceptable outcomes." The signal ended. Across the galaxy, silence followed, then relief, then something close to awe. Lyran turned to Daniel. "They fear you." He shook his head. "No, they understand us." That mattered more. Life on Orialis slowly returned to something like peace. But it was not the same peace as before. It was not based on illusion. It was built on hard truth. Humans stayed. They were no longer background figures. They taught. They learned. They argued. They laughed. Lyran continued her research, but it was different now, less distant, more personal. One cycle, she asked Daniel a question she had avoided. "Why did you stay?" she asked. "After everything, you could have returned to your homeworld as heroes." Daniel thought carefully. "Because if we leave," he said, "people forget, and forgetting is how this starts again." Lyran nodded slowly. That answer felt right. Years later, Lyran stood before a new group of researchers, young minds from many species, humans among them. She began her lecture simply. "Once humanity was ignored," she said. "They were thought weak, temporary, insignificant." She paused. "That belief nearly ended us all." The students listened closely. "Humans are not defined by strength or technology," Lyran continued. "They are defined by response. When faced with failure, they do not stop. When faced with fear, they move forward. When faced with chaos, they adapt." She looked at the humans in the room. "They are not perfect," she said. "That is precisely why they survive." After the lecture, Lyran returned to the observation deck. Daniel was there, older now, but still watching the stars. "You are becoming a legend," he said. Lyran tilted her head. "I am simply telling the truth," he smiled. "That's how legends start." She stood beside him, comfortable in the silence. "Tell me more, human," she said one final time. Daniel laughed softly. "Careful, that question never really ends." Lyran looked out into the endless dark where new stories waited to be told. She understood now. Humanity was not a chapter in the galaxy's history. Humanity was a turning point, and the stars would remember them for it.